The morning sun cast long shadows across the Quantico training range as Sarah Chun adjusted the scope on her custom rifle. Beside her, Maria Rodriguez methodically checked her equipment with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Neither woman wore anything that would immediately identify them as military personnel. To the casual observer, they looked like civilians who had somehow wandered onto one of the most elite shooting ranges in the country. Master Chief Thompson stood near the registration table, his weathered face already showing signs of irritation. He glanced at his watch, then at the two women, then back at his clipboard. The 20 Navy SEALs gathered around the staging area had noticed the newcomers too, and their reactions were immediate and predictable. Hey, quick question for you watching this. What state are you in right now? Does your state have strong support for our military and veterans? I ask because stories like this remind us that talent and dedication can come from anywhere, and sometimes the most unlikely people turn out to be exactly who we need in critical moments. Petty Officer Dalton nudged his teammate. $20 says they don't make it past equipment inspection. His voice carried just loud enough for others to hear. Hernandez shook his head with a grin. I'll take that bet, but only because I think they'll wash out during the safety briefing. The conversation spread through the group like ripples on water. Rodriguez looked maybe 25, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Chin appeared even younger, her slight frame making her look more like a college student than someone who belonged on a military range. Neither seemed to notice the attention they were drawing, but the SEALs were certainly taking note. Thompson called out in his drill instructor voice, "Ladies, you're going to need to present your qualification cards and range permits before we can proceed." The way he emphasized the word ladies carried an unmistakable tone of skepticism. Several SEALs exchanged glances, some crossing their arms as they settled in to watch what they assumed would be a brief and embarrassing conversation. Chun looked up from her rifle with calm eyes. "Of course, Master Chief." She reached in her gear bag and pulled out a folder, handing it over without any sign of nervousness or defensiveness. Rodriguez did the same, her movements equally composed. Thompson opened the first folder, and his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. He flipped through several pages, then opened the second folder. His expression shifted from skeptical to confused to something approaching concern. The SEALs noticed the change immediately. Kowalski leaned toward his partner. "What do you think he's looking at?" Martinez shrugged. "Probably fake credentials. Happens all the time with civilians trying to get onto military ranges." The Master Chief closed both folders and looked at the women with a completely different expression than he had worn moments before. He walked over to Colonel Martinez, who had just arrived at the range, and handed him both folders without saying a word. Colonel Martinez opened the first folder and went completely still. He looked at Chun, then at Rodriguez, then back at the paperwork. The 20 SEALs watched this exchange with growing curiosity, their earlier confidence beginning to waver slightly. Petty Officer Williams whispered to his squad, "This is taking way too long for a simple qualification check. Something's not adding up here." The colonel walked back to the two women, the folders still in his hands. "Miss Chun, Miss Rodriguez, I need to ask you both a direct question. Are you here in an official capacity or as private citizens?" Both women exchanged a quick glance before Chun answered. "Private citizens today, sir. We're here for the civilian marksmanship competition." The colonel nodded slowly, then looked directly at Master Chief Thompson. "Chief, I want you to run this competition exactly as you would for any other participants. No special treatment, no modifications to the standard protocol." Thompson's face had taken on a carefully neutral expression. "Understood, sir." As the colonel walked away, still carrying the folders, the SEALs began to sense that something significant had just happened, though none of them could quite put their finger on what it was. The betting and casual dismissal continued, but with slightly less certainty than before. The equipment inspection proceeded with mechanical precision. Master Chief Thompson moved down the line of competitors, checking each rifle, scope, and ammunition setup with a thoroughness that had made him legendary among Marine snipers. The 20 SEALs had their gear arranged with military precision, each weapon a testament to years of experience and countless hours of training. When Thompson reached Chin's position, he paused. Her rifle was a custom build that most civilians would never have access to, let alone know how to properly configure. The scope alone cost more than most people's cars, and every modification spoke to someone who understood long-range precision shooting at the highest level. Thompson picked up the weapon and examined it closely. Petty Officer Jackson leaned over to his teammate. "Look at that scope setup. Either she's got more money than sense, or she actually knows what she's doing." Rodriguez's equipment drew even more attention. Her rifle bore the subtle marks of extensive field use, but every component was maintained to perfection. The barrel showed the wear patterns of someone who had fired thousands of rounds in various conditions, yet the action operated with the smoothness of a precision instrument. Dalton shook his head as he watched Thompson inspect the women's gear. "I still say they're civilians playing dress-up. Probably took some weekend course and think they're ready for the big leagues." His confidence had wavered slightly since the colonel's reaction, but his voice still carried conviction. The range safety briefing began with Thompson's standard warnings about muzzle discipline, range commands, and emergency procedures. The SEALs listened with the practiced attention of professionals who had heard similar briefings hundreds of times. Chin and Rodriguez paid equal attention, but their posture suggested familiarity rather than nervousness. Hernandez noticed something during the briefing. "Watch how they're standing. They're not nervous at all. Most civilians get jittery during the safety talk, but these two look like they could recite it themselves." Williams nodded in agreement. "Maybe they're not complete amateurs, but there's a big difference between shooting at a civilian range and competing against us. We've been doing this for years." Thompson finished the briefing and began explaining the competition format. Today's exercise would consist of 3 phases: precision shooting at known distances, rapid engagement of multiple targets, and a final challenge involving moving targets in variable wind conditions. Each phase would eliminate the lowest performers until only the top marksmen remained. The betting among the SEALs continued, though with slightly less certainty than before. Kowalski pulled out his wallet. 50 says they don't make it past the first elimination round. Martinez considered the bet. "I'll take 20 of that, but only because they've got decent equipment." As the competitors moved to their assigned firing positions, the true scale of the challenge became apparent. The targets ranged from 600 to 1,200 meters, with the final phase extending to 1,500 meters in crosswind conditions that would test even experienced military snipers. Chun and Rodriguez took their positions without fanfare, setting up their equipment with efficient movements that spoke to extensive practice. Neither woman showed any signs of intimidation as they surveyed the range and assessed the wind conditions. Petty Officer Davis watched them through binoculars. "They're reading the wind flags like they actually know what they're doing. Still doesn't mean they can hit anything at this distance." The first phase began with each competitor taking 5 shots at a 600-meter target. The SEALs fired in sequence, most achieving respectable groupings that demonstrated their skill. A few scored perfect 10s on all 5 shots, drawing appreciative nods from their teammates. When Chin's turn arrived, she settled behind her rifle with the fluid motion of someone who had done this countless times before. Her breathing pattern was textbook perfect, and her trigger squeeze showed the kind of control that comes only from extensive training. Her first shot punched through the 10-ring dead center. The second followed within millimeters of the first. By the 5th shot, she had achieved a grouping that several SEALs were studying through their spotting scopes with growing surprise. Thompson announced the score. Chun, 5 shots, all 10s, group size 2.3 inches. The range fell quiet as the implications of that accuracy became clear. At 600 meters, that level of precision was exceptional even by military standards. Rodriguez stepped up for her turn, and the SEALs watched with considerably more attention than they had shown before. Her first shot matched Chin's accuracy, and her subsequent shots created a grouping that was somehow even tighter. 5 10s, group size 1.9 inches. Thompson's voice carried a note of professional respect that hadn't been there before. The SEALs exchanged glances that contained significantly less confidence than their earlier predictions. Dalton stared at the target through his scope. That's not beginner's luck. You don't shoot groups like that without serious training. As the competition prepared to move to the next phase, the atmosphere among the 20 SEALs had shifted from casual dismissal to cautious respect. The two women who had seemed so out of place just an hour before were proving that appearances could be dangerously deceiving. The second phase moved the competition to 800 meters with a twist that separated professional marksmen from weekend shooters. Each competitor would engage 5 targets in rapid succession, with only 90 seconds to complete all shots. The targets were smaller, the time pressure was intense, and the margin for error had essentially disappeared. Master Chief Thompson gathered the remaining competitors around the firing line. The first phase eliminated 6 shooters who couldn't maintain the required accuracy. 22 marksmen remained, including all 20 SEALs and the 2 women who were quickly becoming the subject of intense speculation. Petty Officer Martinez adjusted his scope as he studied the target array. 800 meters in 90 seconds means you've got roughly 15 seconds per target, including acquisition time. That's pushing it even for us. Williams nodded as he calculated the challenge. And these targets are only 8 inches across. Miss by more than 4 inches and you're out. He glanced toward Chun and Rodriguez, who were quietly discussing wind patterns and target positioning. They're still here, but this is where experience really counts. The SEALs maintained their confidence despite the impressive showing in the first phase. Jackson voiced what most were thinking. Getting lucky on stationary targets is one thing. Speed shooting under time pressure is where training shows. We do this stuff for a living. Thompson called the first shooter to the line, and the SEALs watched their teammate methodically work through the target sequence. He completed 4 solid hits and 1 marginal shot that kept him in the competition. The next SEAL improved on that performance with 5 clean hits and time to spare. As each SEAL took their turn, the standard of performance remained consistently high. These were elite operators who had trained for exactly this type of challenge, and their scores reflected years of professional development. The confidence that had been shaken during the first phase began to return. Dalton finished his run with 5 hits and 30 seconds remaining on the clock. He walked back to his teammates with a satisfied expression. That's how it's done. Let's see the college girls handle this kind of pressure. Kowalski was already calculating odds again. I'll bet they choke now. Time pressure changes everything. You can't think your way through rapid fire like you can with deliberate precision shots. Chun approached the firing line with the same calm demeanor she had shown throughout the morning. She settled behind her rifle and began her engagement sequence without any visible signs of stress or hurry. Her movements were fluid and efficient, each shot flowing naturally into the next target acquisition. The spotters called her hits as they occurred. Target 1, center hit. Target 2, center hit. Target 3, clean. Target 4, solid 10. Target 5, dead center. Time remaining, 47 seconds. The range fell into a silence that was becoming familiar whenever Chun completed a sequence. Thompson announced her score with growing professional admiration. 5 hits, average score 9.2, well within time limits. Rodriguez stepped up immediately after, and the SEALs watched with the intense focus of competitors who were beginning to understand they were witnessing something exceptional. Her shooting rhythm was slightly different from Chen's, but equally effective. Her targets fell in sequence with mechanical precision. Each shot was placed with the kind of accuracy that suggested she could have taken more time if necessary, but chose not to. When Thompson called time, she had completed all 5 engagements with over 50 seconds to spare. 5 hits, average score 9.4, time remaining 53 seconds. Thompson's voice carried a note of amazement that he tried to keep professional. The SEALs exchanged looks that contained considerably less bravado than their earlier assessments. Hernandez shook his head slowly. That's not civilian shooting. I don't care what their paperwork says. Nobody shoots like that without serious military training. Davis was studying both women through his binoculars. Look at how they move between targets. That's not sports shooting technique. That's combat marksmanship. Whoever trained them knew what they were doing. The competition moved into its final preparation phase as Thompson explained the ultimate challenge. The third phase would push everyone to 1,500 meters with moving targets and variable wind conditions. Only the top 10 performers would advance, and the targets would be the smallest yet attempted. Williams looked at the distant target array through his spotting scope. 1,500 meters with 6-inch targets and crosswinds. This is where we separate the professionals from everyone else. He glanced toward Chun and Rodriguez. They've been impressive so far, but this is our specialty. The betting had stopped entirely among the SEALs. What had begun as easy money was turning into something that none of them had expected when they arrived that morning. The elimination round concluded with brutal efficiency. 12 competitors failed to meet the minimum accuracy standards at 800 meters, leaving 10 marksmen for the final phase. All 20 SEALs had advanced, along with Chun and Rodriguez, but the atmosphere among the elite operators had shifted dramatically from their morning confidence. Master Chief Thompson gathered the finalists around a detailed range map that showed the complexity of the final challenge. The targets were positioned at 1,500 meters across varied terrain that included elevation changes and wind channels that could shift without warning. Each shooter would have 3 attempts at 3 different targets, with scoring based on both accuracy and consistency. Petty Officer Jackson studied the map with growing concern. Look at these wind flags. We've got crosswinds coming off the ridge, thermals rising from the valley floor, and that gap between the hills is going to create unpredictable gusts. This isn't just about marksmanship anymore. Williams nodded as he traced the sight lines with his finger. 1,500 meters is where environmental factors become as important as shooting skill. You need to read conditions that change between shots. He glanced toward Chun and Rodriguez, who were studying the same map with intense concentration. The question is whether they understand field conditions or just know how to shoot on a controlled range. Thompson began his briefing on the specific challenges ahead. At this distance, wind drift can move your shot several feet off target. Temperature affects bullet velocity. Mirage can make target identification difficult. You'll need to adjust for all these factors while maintaining the accuracy standards we've established. The SEALs listened with professional attention, but several were making mental calculations about their chances against opponents who had already exceeded every expectation. Dalton spoke quietly to his teammate. I've been watching them read wind conditions, and they're not doing it like civilians. They're checking multiple indicators and making the same assessments we would. Martinez was observing Chin's equipment setup. That scope has military-grade ranging capabilities, and look how she's positioning her spotting scope. She's setting up for long-range field conditions, not range shooting. Either she's incredibly well-trained, or this isn't her first time doing this kind of work. The final phase preparation allowed each shooter time to study the targets through spotting scopes and assess the environmental conditions. The wind was gusting between 8 and 15 miles per hour with occasional stronger bursts that would challenge even experienced snipers. Rodriguez took her time studying each target through her scope, making notes on a small pad that she kept in her gear kit. Her observations were systematic and thorough, covering wind indicators, temperature gradients, and potential mirage effects. Her methodology was textbook military sniper training. Kowalski watched her preparation routine. She's not just looking at targets. She's building a complete environmental picture like we do on deployment. That's not something you learn at civilian shooting schools. Chun was conducting her own assessment with equal professionalism. She spent several minutes studying wind patterns at different elevations, noting how the flags showed varying conditions along the bullet's flight path. Her preparation routine was methodical and comprehensive. Hernandez observed her technique. Look at how she's reading layered wind conditions. Most sport shooters only check the flag near their position, but she's analyzing the entire flight path. That's advanced field craft. Thompson called for the final equipment inspection before live fire commenced. Each rifle was checked for proper setup, ammunition was verified for consistency, and safety equipment was confirmed. The standards were rigorous, befitting a competition that would push every shooter to their maximum capability. As the inspection proceeded, several SEALs noticed details about the women's equipment that reinforced their growing suspicions. Davis pointed out Chin's ammunition selection. Those aren't commercial loads. That's match-grade military ammunition with lot numbers that indicate government procurement. Williams examined Rodriguez's rifle during the inspection. This barrel has been professionally customized for long-range work, and these modifications are expensive. Someone invested serious money in optimizing this weapon for exactly this type of shooting. The final briefing covered emergency procedures, range safety during adverse conditions, and the scoring system that would determine the ultimate winner. Thompson emphasized that environmental conditions were expected to deteriorate throughout the afternoon, making later shooters face more challenging circumstances. Martinez looked at the shooting order and realized both women were scheduled near the end of the sequence. They're going to face the worst conditions. If they really are civilians, this is where they'll finally break down. Wind is supposed to pick up, and afternoon thermals will create serious mirage problems. Jackson agreed with the assessment. We've got the advantage of shooting in better conditions. By the time they get to the line, they'll be dealing with environmental factors that require real experience to handle. The competition was about to enter its most demanding phase, where equipment, training, and experience would determine who could maintain precision under the most challenging conditions the range could provide. The final phase commenced with precision that befitted the elite nature of the competition. The first SEAL took his position behind the firing line. His spotting scope trained on the distant targets that appeared as small dark circles against the varied terrain backdrop. The wind had indeed picked up as predicted, creating challenging conditions that would test every aspect of long-range marksmanship skill. Petty Officer Davis settled behind his rifle for the opening sequence. He took his time reading the wind conditions, studying the flags positioned at regular intervals along the 1,500-meter range. His first shot was carefully calculated, accounting for wind drift and bullet drop across the extended distance. The spotter called his hit. Target 1, 8 ring, lower left. The shot was solid, but showed the difficulty of the conditions. Davis made his adjustments and fired again, achieving a 9-ring hit that demonstrated his skill while revealing the challenge ahead. As each SEAL took their turn, the pattern became clear. These were exceptional marksmen facing exceptional conditions, and even elite operators were finding the combination of distance, wind, and time pressure demanding. Scores ranged from acceptable to excellent, but perfection was proving elusive. Williams completed his sequence with 2 solid hits and 1 marginal shot that kept him competitive. As he walked back to the observation area, he studied the wind flags with professional concern. Conditions are getting worse. That crosswind is gusting up to 20 now, and the thermals are creating serious mirage effects. Hernandez nodded as he prepared for his own attempt. The women are scheduled to shoot in the worst conditions. They've been impressive so far, but this is where environmental experience really matters. Reading mirage and compensating for gusting winds isn't something you learn from books. The competition continued with methodical precision as each SEAL demonstrated the skills that had earned them their elite status. Jackson achieved 3 solid hits despite challenging conditions. Martinez managed 2 excellent shots, and one that was slightly off due to an unexpected wind gust. Kowalski's performance was consistent with his reputation as one of the unit's best marksmen. By the time half the SEALs had completed their attempts, the pattern was established. Scores were respectable, but showed the impact of deteriorating conditions. The wind had become increasingly unpredictable, and the afternoon sun was creating heat shimmer that made precise target identification difficult. Dalton finished his sequence and joined his teammates in the observation area. I managed 2 good hits, but that 3rd shot got caught by a wind gust I didn't see coming. The conditions are definitely getting harder. The remaining SEALs completed their attempts with similar results. These were highly skilled marksmen facing genuinely challenging circumstances, and their scores reflected both their ability and the difficulty of the conditions. Several achieved excellent results despite the environmental factors, but none managed perfect scores across all 3 targets. Thompson tallied the scores as the final SEAL completed his attempt. The standings showed a tight competition among the elite operators, with several tied for the lead and others close behind. The scoring had been competitive and professional, exactly what was expected from this level of marksmanship competition. As the afternoon progressed, the environmental conditions continued to deteriorate exactly as Thompson had predicted. Wind speeds increased, thermal effects became more pronounced, and the challenge facing the final two competitors intensified significantly. Chen approached the firing line as the 19th competitor, facing conditions that were noticeably worse than those encountered by the early shooters. The wind flags showed gusting patterns that would require exceptional skill to read accurately, and the heat shimmer was creating visual distortions that would challenge even experienced field snipers. The SEALs gathered to observe her attempt with intense professional interest. Martinez voiced what they were all thinking. This is where we find out if they're really as good as they've seemed. Reading complex wind patterns and compensating for thermal effects requires field experience you can't get at civilian ranges. Williams agreed as he studied the conditions through his spotting scope. Look at those flags. The wind is shifting direction every few seconds, and the mirage is making the targets dance. She's going to need to time her shots perfectly and make real-time adjustments for conditions that are changing faster than she can respond. Chen settled behind her rifle with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the day. She spent several minutes studying the environmental indicators, building a complete picture of the complex conditions she would need to navigate. Her preparation was thorough and systematic, showing no signs of intimidation despite the challenging circumstances. Jackson watched her preparation routine through binoculars. She's taking more time than we did, but look how she's reading multiple wind indicators. She's not just checking the flags near her position, she's analyzing conditions along the entire flight path. The stage was set for the most demanding test of marksmanship skill that the range could provide. Chen's breathing pattern shifted into the controlled rhythm that marked a transition from preparation to execution. The wind flags showed complex patterns that changed every few seconds, creating a puzzle that would challenge even the most experienced marksman. She waited, watching the indicators with patient focus while the SEALs observed her technique with growing professional curiosity. The first shot came after nearly 3 minutes of preparation. Chun fired during a brief moment when the wind conditions aligned, and the bullet's path to the target was as favorable as the chaotic conditions would allow. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range, followed by the silence that always accompanied long-distance shooting as everyone waited for the spotter's call. Target 1, dead center. 10 ring. The announcement carried across the observation area with crystal clarity, and several SEALs exchanged glances that contained considerably more respect than skepticism. Martinez lowered his binoculars. That shot required reading wind patterns that were changing faster than most people can process. She timed it perfectly for a momentary window when conditions aligned. Chen made adjustments to her scope and began preparing for the second target. The wind had shifted again, now coming from a slightly different angle with increased velocity. She waded through several potential shooting opportunities, declining to fire when conditions were not optimal. Williams watched her patience with professional admiration. She's not rushing. Most shooters under pressure try to force shots when conditions are marginal, but she's waiting for the right moment. That's field discipline you only get from serious training. The second shot came after another extended wait. Chen had identified a pattern in the wind gusts and fired during a brief lull that provided a clear flight path to the target. Her timing was precise, taking advantage of environmental conditions that lasted only seconds. Target 2, 10 ring, center mass. Thompson's voice carried the tone of someone who was witnessing exceptional marksmanship under challenging conditions. Dalton studied the wind flags through his spotting scope. Those conditions are getting worse, not better. That crosswind is gusting over 20 now, and the thermals are creating serious mirage problems. How is she reading this stuff so accurately? The third target presented the greatest challenge yet. The wind patterns had become increasingly chaotic, and the heat shimmer was creating visual distortions that made precise aiming extremely difficult. Chen spent nearly 5 minutes analyzing conditions before identifying her opportunity. Her final shot was fired during a momentary calm that few observers had even noticed. The environmental window was so brief that most of the SEALs were surprised when she took the shot, having missed the subtle indicators that told her conditions were optimal. Target 3, 10 ring, perfect center. Thompson's announcement was met with stunned silence from the observation area. Jackson shook his head in disbelief. 3 perfect shots in conditions that gave all of us trouble. That's not luck. That's advanced fieldcraft. Nobody shoots like that without extensive training in environmental compensation. Rodriguez approached the firing line as the final competitor, facing conditions that had continued to deteriorate throughout the afternoon. The wind was now gusting consistently over 20 miles per hour, and the thermal effects were creating visual distortions that would challenge any marksman. The SEALs watched her preparation with intense focus, having witnessed Chen's exceptional performance and wondering if Rodriguez could match that level of skill under even worse conditions. The betting had stopped entirely, replaced by professional curiosity about capabilities that exceeded their initial expectations. Kowalski voiced what everyone was thinking. If she can match what we just saw, we're dealing with shooters who have training that rivals our own. These aren't civilians playing at marksmanship. Rodriguez settled behind her rifle with movements that showed complete familiarity with long-range shooting under adverse conditions. Her preparation routine was different from Chen's, but equally thorough, focusing on multiple environmental indicators that would affect bullet flight across 1,500 meters. Hernandez watched her technique through binoculars. Look at how she's reading mirage patterns. She's using techniques that we use in the field, not sports shooting methods. Someone taught her military sniper craft. The stage was set for the final sequence that would determine whether the day's surprises would continue or if the challenging conditions would finally prove too much for competitors who had already exceeded every expectation the SEALs had brought to the range. Rodriguez began her sequence facing the worst environmental conditions of the entire day. The wind was now gusting unpredictably between 15 and 25 miles per hour, creating crosswind effects that would challenge even the most experienced military snipers. The afternoon thermals had reached their peak intensity, causing heat shimmer that made the distant targets appear to dance and shift. The 20 SEALs gathered closer to the observation area, their earlier casual dismissal replaced by intense professional focus. What they were witnessing had transformed from a routine civilian competition into something that demanded their complete attention as elite marksmen. Petty Officer Williams studied the conditions through a spotting scope. These are field conditions we train for in advanced courses. Gusting crosswinds, thermal effects, extended range with small targets. This is where real experience separates professionals from everyone else. Davis nodded as he watched Rodriguez methodically study the wind indicators positioned along the range. She's been impressive so far, but these conditions are brutal. Look at those flags. They're changing direction every few seconds. You need serious field experience to read patterns in chaos like this. Rodriguez spent nearly 4 minutes analyzing the environmental factors before attempting her first shot. She studied wind flags at multiple distances, observed mirage patterns through her scope, and waited for optimal conditions with the patience of someone who understood that rushing would guarantee failure. Martinez watched her preparation routine with growing recognition. That's not civilian methodology. She's using field techniques for reading complex environmental conditions. Someone gave her advanced military training in long-range environmental compensation. The first shot came during a brief moment when the wind conditions aligned across the entire flight path. Rodriguez had identified a pattern that lasted only seconds, timing her shot to take advantage of a momentary window when crosswind effects were minimized. Target 1, 10 ring, dead center. Thompson's announcement carried across the range with professional admiration that was becoming familiar whenever either woman completed a sequence. Jackson lowered his binoculars with an expression of amazement. That was textbook environmental timing. She read wind patterns that were changing faster than most people can track and found the exact moment when conditions were optimal. Rodriguez made scope adjustments and began preparing for her second target. The environmental conditions have become even more challenging, with wind gusts now approaching 30 miles per hour and thermal effects creating visual distortions that made precise aiming extremely difficult. Kowalski studied the wind flags through his spotting scope. This is insane. The crosswind is gusting so hard that bullet drift could be measured in feet, not inches. She's going to need to make calculations that account for wind changes during flight time. The second shot required an extended wait as Rodriguez analyzed patterns in the chaotic wind conditions. She declined several potential opportunities, waiting for the specific combination of environmental factors that would allow accurate shot placement at 1,500 meters. Hernandez watched her patience with professional respect. She's not forcing it. That's field discipline you only develop through serious training under adverse conditions. Most shooters would have taken a marginal shot by now. When Rodriguez finally fired, her timing was so precise that several SEALs were caught off guard. She had identified environmental conditions that lasted mere seconds, firing during a window that few observers had even noticed. Target 2, 10 ring, perfect center. Thompson's voice carried genuine amazement at the consistency of performance under conditions that had challenged every other competitor. Dalton stared at the target through his spotting scope. 2 perfect shots in conditions that are getting worse by the minute. This isn't beginner's luck or equipment advantage. This is advanced marksmanship training at the highest level. The third target presented the ultimate challenge as environmental conditions reached their peak difficulty. Wind speeds were now consistently over 25 miles per hour with gusts approaching 35. The thermal effects were so severe that the targets appeared to shift and waver even through high-quality optics. Williams voiced what every SEAL was thinking. If she can hit the third target in these conditions, we're witnessing marksmanship that rivals anything we can do. These women have training that's on par with our own. Rodriguez prepared for her final shot with the same methodical approach she had shown throughout the sequence. The environmental analysis took over 5 minutes as she studied conditions that were changing rapidly and unpredictably. Her patience was remarkable given the pressure of performing in front of elite operators who had initially dismissed her capabilities. Martinez watched her preparation through binoculars. Look at how she's reading layered wind effects. That's advanced environmental analysis they teach in military sniper schools. She's accounting for wind conditions at multiple elevations along the bullet's flight path. The moment arrived with sudden clarity as Rodriguez identified optimal conditions and fired her final shot. The environmental window was so brief that most observers missed the indicators that told her the moment was right. Target 3, 10 ring, dead center. Thompson's announcement was met with complete silence from the SEALs, who were processing the implications of what they had just witnessed. The silence following Rodriguez's perfect performance stretched across the range like a physical presence. 20 Navy SEALs, each an elite marksman with years of combat experience, stood processing what they had just witnessed. 2 women who had appeared to be civilian participants had just delivered flawless shooting performances under conditions that had challenged every professional operator on the range. Master Chief Thompson began calculating final scores with mechanical precision, but the outcome was already clear to everyone present. The 2 competitors who had faced the worst environmental conditions had achieved perfect scores, while the SEALs, shooting in better circumstances, had produced respectable but imperfect results. Petty Officer Martinez broke the silence first. 6 perfect shots between them, in conditions that got progressively worse. That's not civilian marksmanship. That's professional-level environmental compensation. Williams nodded slowly as he studied both women through his binoculars. Look at how they're handling their equipment. That's not sports shooting technique. That's military methodology. Someone gave them advanced training in long-range field conditions. Jackson was reviewing his mental notes from the entire competition. Think about it. Professional-grade equipment, military ammunition, advanced environmental reading techniques, and perfect performance under pressure. These aren't weekend warriors who got lucky. The SEALs began connecting observations they had made throughout the day. Dalton pointed toward Chen's rifle setup. I noticed earlier that her scope has ranging capabilities we use in the field. That equipment costs more than most people make in a year, and it's configured for military applications. Kowalski was studying Rodriguez's ammunition selection. Those aren't commercial loads. That's match-grade military ammunition with lot numbers that indicate government procurement. Civilians don't have access to that kind of precision ammunition. Thompson finished his calculations and prepared to announce results that would formalize what everyone already understood. The competition had been decided not by equipment or luck, but by superior skill demonstrated under the most challenging conditions the range could provide. Hernandez voiced the question that was forming in every mind. Who are they really? Nobody shoots like that without extensive military training. The kind of environmental compensation they just demonstrated takes years to develop. Davis was reviewing the entire day's events. Remember the colonel's reaction when he saw their paperwork. He went from skeptical to concerned to completely different treatment. Whatever was in those folders changed everything. The speculation continued as the SEALs processed the implications of being outshot by competitors they had initially dismissed. Williams studied both women's posture and equipment handling. Everything about their technique screams military training. The way they read wind, their patience under pressure, their environmental analysis methodology. Martinez was connecting additional details. Look at how they've been communicating with each other. Brief, efficient, professional. That's military fieldcraft, not civilian competition behavior. Thompson called for attention to announce the final results, though the outcome was already clear to everyone present. The scoring reflected not just superior marksmanship, but exceptional skill demonstrated under conditions that had tested every participant to their limits. Jackson shook his head in amazement. We came here expecting to show some civilians how real shooting is done. Instead, we just got schooled by two women who shoot better than we do. The SEALs began approaching the situation with the professional respect that elite operators show when they encounter superior capability. Dalton spoke for the group. Whatever their background, they've earned our respect. That was exceptional marksmanship under challenging conditions. Colonel Martinez chose that moment to return to the range, still carrying the folders that had caused such concern earlier in the day. His timing suggested he had been monitoring the competition and waiting for the appropriate moment to address the results. Williams noticed the colonel's approach. Here comes the colonel again. Maybe now we'll get some answers about who these women really are. The colonel's expression was serious as he surveyed the scene. 20 elite SEALs standing in respectful silence, while two women packed their equipment with professional efficiency. The dynamic had shifted completely from the morning's casual dismissal to afternoon recognition of exceptional capability. Thompson stepped forward to brief the colonel on results that exceeded everyone's expectations except, apparently, the colonel himself. Sir, competition is complete. Final scores show exceptional performance across all phases. The colonel nodded, as if the results confirmed rather than surprised him. Thank you, Master Chief. I believe it's time for some introductions that should have happened earlier today. The SEALs gathered closer, sensing that answers to their growing questions were finally approaching. The mysterious reactions, the perfect marksmanship, and the professional methodology were about to be explained. Colonel Martinez opened the first folder with deliberate ceremony, his expression indicating that what he was about to reveal would transform everyone's understanding of the day's events. The 20 SEALs gathered in a semicircle, their earlier skepticism replaced by intense curiosity about the two women who had just demonstrated marksmanship that exceeded their own capabilities. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Chief Petty Officer Sarah Chun, United States Navy. The colonel's words hit the assembled SEALs like a physical blow. She's currently assigned to SEAL Team 6 as a designated marksman and holds the Navy record for longest confirmed kill at 2,400 meters. The silence that followed was deafening. Martinez continued reading from Chen's file. 3 combat deployments, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, and Navy Commendation Medal. She's credited with neutralizing 47 enemy combatants in designated sniper operations. Petty Officer Williams stepped back involuntarily. SEAL Team 6. That's DevGru. She's not just Navy, She's one of the most elite operators in the entire military. Colonel Martinez opened the second folder. And this is Chief Petty Officer Maria Rodriguez, also United States Navy, also assigned to SEAL Team 6. She holds the record for most confirmed kills in a single deployment, with 63 enemy combatants eliminated. Jackson's voice was barely audible. 2 SEAL Team, 6 snipers. We've been competing against DevGru operators and didn't know it. The colonel continued reading Rodriguez's credentials. 4 combat deployments, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, Purple Heart. She's the lead instructor for advanced sniper training at the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Dalton shook his head in disbelief. The lead instructor. We just watched the person who trains the best snipers in the Navy demonstrate why she has that job. Martinez closed both folders and looked at the assembled SEALs. Both Chief Petty Officers are here on leave, participating as private citizens in what they thought would be a relaxing civilian competition. They had no intention of revealing their identities unless circumstances required it. Kowalski was processing the implications. They weren't trying to show us up. They were just participating in what they thought was a civilian event, and we started making assumptions about their capabilities. The colonel's expression showed a mix of amusement and concern. When I saw their credentials this morning, I realized we had a situation where elite operators were about to compete against each other without knowing it. I decided to let the competition proceed naturally. Hernandez looked toward Chun and Rodriguez with newfound understanding. That's why they seemed so calm under pressure. They've been in actual combat situations where missing a shot meant losing teammates. Martinez addressed the SEALs directly. What you witnessed today was a demonstration of why SEAL Team 6 maintains the reputation it has. These 2 operators represent the absolute pinnacle of military marksmanship training. Davis was reviewing the day's events with complete context. Everything makes sense now. The equipment, the ammunition, the environmental analysis techniques, the patience under pressure. We were watching combat veterans demonstrate skills they've used in actual operations. The colonel gestured toward Chun and Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the revelation with professional composure. I think some introductions are in order, along with apologies for the assumptions that were made earlier today. Williams stepped forward first. Chief Chun, Chief Rodriguez, I want to apologize for our behavior this morning. We made assumptions based on appearances rather than waiting to see your capabilities. Martinez nodded in agreement. You both demonstrated exceptional professionalism by not revealing your identities when we were making fools of ourselves with our betting and commentary. Chin spoke for the first time since the revelation. We understand completely. We've been in similar situations where appearances led to incorrect assumptions. We chose to let our shooting speak for itself. Rodriguez added with a slight smile. Besides, it's been a while since we had the opportunity to shoot in a relaxed environment. This was actually quite enjoyable despite the initial skepticism. Jackson was still processing the magnitude of the situation. We spent the morning making jokes about civilians, and we were actually in the presence of 2 of the most elite snipers in the entire military. The atmosphere had shifted completely from morning dismissal to afternoon reverence. 20 SEALs who considered themselves elite operators had just been outshot by 2 women whose credentials and combat experience exceeded anything they had imagined possible when the day began. The revelation of Chun and Rodriguez's true identities had transformed the entire dynamic on the range. But Master Chief Thompson wasn't finished with the day's surprises. He approached Colonel Martinez with a document that had been prepared based on the competition results, his expression indicating that additional recognition was warranted. Sir, based on today's performance, I'm recommending both Chief Petty Officers for formal recognition of their exceptional marksmanship demonstration. What they accomplished under those environmental conditions exceeds anything I've witnessed in 30 years of range operations. Colonel Martinez reviewed Thompson's documentation while the SEALs continued processing the magnitude of what they had experienced. The 2 women who had arrived looking like civilian participants were not only Navy SEALs, but members of the most elite Special Operations unit in the entire military. Petty Officer Martinez spoke for the group. Chief Chun, Chief Rodriguez, we owe you more than apologies. You demonstrated professionalism and skill that exceeded our own capabilities, and you did it with grace despite our initial skepticism. Chen's response reflected the quiet confidence that had characterized her entire performance. We appreciate that, but understand that initial reactions based on appearances are natural. What matters is how people respond when they have complete information. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. We've all made assumptions in our careers. The difference is whether you're willing to acknowledge when you're wrong and learn from the experience. Williams stepped forward with a question that reflected his growing professional curiosity. Chief Rodriguez, that environmental analysis you did during the final phase, that was unlike anything we learned in standard sniper training. How do you develop that level of environmental compensation capability? Rodriguez's answer provided insight into training methodologies that exceeded standard military instruction. DevGru sniper training includes advanced environmental modules that cover complex wind patterns, thermal effects, and multi-layered atmosphere conditions. We train in environments that simulate the worst possible field conditions. Jackson was taking mental notes for his own professional development. The patience you both showed under pressure, waiting for optimal environmental windows, that's discipline we could all benefit from learning. Chen explained the methodology behind their approach. Combat situations require shots that have to be perfect on the first attempt. You develop patience because second chances often don't exist in operational environments. Dalton asked about equipment selection and customization. Your rifle configurations, they're optimized for field conditions rather than range shooting. How much difference does that specialized setup make at extended ranges? The technical discussion that followed provided the SEALs with insights into equipment optimization that went far beyond standard military issue. Chun and Rodriguez shared knowledge about barrel selection, scope configuration, and ammunition matching that reflected years of operational experience. Kowalski was impressed by the depth of their technical knowledge. You're not just exceptional shooters. You're weapons systems experts who understand every aspect of long-range precision engagement. Thompson interrupted the technical discussion with an announcement that formalized the day's remarkable events. Based on today's performance, I'm entering both Chief Petty Officers into the range record books. Their scores under adverse conditions represent the highest level of marksmanship demonstrated at this facility. Hernandez voiced what everyone was thinking. This has been a learning experience for all of us. We came here thinking we were the best shooters on the range, and we discovered there are levels of capability we hadn't even imagined. The colonel addressed the group with observations about the day's lessons. What happened here demonstrates why we never stop learning in this profession. Exceptional capability can appear in unexpected forms, and professional growth comes from recognizing and learning from superior performance. Davis was still processing the implications for his own training regimen. Chief Chun, Chief Rodriguez, would you be willing to share some of the advanced techniques you use for environmental analysis? We'd like to incorporate those methods into our own training programs. Both women agreed to provide technical guidance that would benefit the SEALs' professional development. Their willingness to share advanced knowledge reflected the cooperative spirit that characterizes elite military units when they encounter exceptional capability. Rodriguez offered additional insight. The most important lesson is that marksmanship isn't just about equipment or basic technique. It's about understanding environmental factors, developing patience under pressure, and maintaining focus when conditions are challenging. The afternoon had evolved from a competition into a masterclass conducted by two of the most skilled operators in the military, providing learning opportunities that would influence the SEALs' professional development for years to come. The transformation in the SEALs' attitudes was complete and unmistakable. 20 elite operators who had begun the day with casual dismissal now stood in genuine reverence before two women whose capabilities had exceeded every expectation and assumption they had brought to the range. Petty Officer Williams approached Chun with the respect reserved for superior operators. Chief Chin, I have to ask about that final sequence. The way you read those wind conditions and waited for optimal environmental windows, that showed field discipline I've never seen demonstrated under competition pressure. Chin's response revealed training methodologies that went beyond standard military instruction. In operational environments, you often get only one shot to neutralize a target that poses an immediate threat to your team. That develops patience and environmental awareness that can't be replicated in training scenarios. Martinez was studying the target results through his spotting scope. 6 perfect shots between you both in conditions that challenged every one of us. That's not just exceptional marksmanship. That's tactical supremacy demonstrated under pressure. Rodriguez explained the mindset behind their performance. DevGru training emphasizes adaptability under changing conditions. Environmental factors in combat zones are often worse than what we face today, so these challenges felt manageable by comparison. Jackson was processing the implications for his own professional development. We train constantly to maintain our edge as elite operators, but watching your performance today showed us capabilities we didn't know were possible. The technical discussion continued as the SEALs sought to understand methodologies that had produced superior results. Dalton asked about scope configuration and environmental compensation techniques that went beyond standard sniper training protocols. Chun shared insights about advanced ranging techniques and multi-layered environmental analysis that reflected years of operational refinement. The equipment setup you observed represents continuous improvement based on field experience in various combat environments. Kowalski was taking detailed mental notes for future training applications. The systematic approach you both use for environmental analysis, that's a methodology we need to incorporate into our own preparation routines. Thompson interrupted with additional recognition that formalized the day's exceptional demonstrations. Chiefs, based on your performance under these conditions, I'm recommending you both for inclusion in the facility's Hall of Excellence. Your shooting today represents the pinnacle of military marksmanship. The SEALs voiced their agreement with Thompson's recommendation. Hernandez spoke for the group. This recognition is completely warranted. What we witnessed today redefined our understanding of what's possible in long-range precision shooting. Colonel Martinez addressed the broader implications of the day's events. This experience demonstrates why the military invests in advanced training programs and why we never assume we've reached the limits of human capability. Davis was reflecting on lessons that extended beyond marksmanship technique. You both showed us that exceptional capability often appears in unexpected forms, and that professional growth requires recognizing and learning from superior performance. Rodriguez offered final insights that would influence the SEALs' future training approaches. The most important lesson is maintaining humility and continuous learning. Every operational environment teaches something new about environmental factors and equipment optimization. Williams summarized the transformation that had occurred throughout the day. We came here thinking we understood the standards for elite marksmanship. You both demonstrated that there are levels of capability that exceed what we thought was possible. The afternoon had evolved into a masterclass that would influence these operators' professional development for years to come. Chun and Rodriguez had not only demonstrated superior marksmanship, but had provided educational opportunities that enhanced everyone's understanding of advanced sniper techniques. Martinez voiced the respect that characterized the group's final assessment. Chiefs, you've shown us what exceptional really means. Your performance today will be discussed in our unit for years as an example of the highest standards of military marksmanship. Jackson added his own recognition of the day's lessons. This has been humbling and educational. We learned that assumptions based on appearances can prevent us from recognizing exceptional capability when we encounter it. The SEALs had experienced a complete reversal of their initial perceptions, moving from dismissive skepticism to genuine admiration for operators whose skills exceeded their own. The 2 women who had seemed so out of place that morning had proven to be exactly where they belonged among elite military marksmen. 6 months later, the story of that extraordinary day at Quantico had become legend within the Navy SEAL community. The tale of two women who had quietly outshot 20 elite operators served as a powerful reminder about assumptions, respect, and the unexpected nature of exceptional capability. Master Chief Thompson kept the range records prominently displayed, and every new group of trainees heard the complete account of Chun and Rodriguez's perfect performance under the most challenging conditions the facility could provide. The story had become a teaching tool about professional humility and the importance of recognizing superior capability regardless of its source. The 20 SEALs who had witnessed that demonstration carried the lessons into their own careers and training programs. Williams had implemented Chin's environmental analysis techniques into his unit's sniper training, significantly improving their long-range accuracy under adverse conditions. Martinez incorporated Rodriguez's patience and timing methodology into advanced marksmanship instruction, teaching new snipers the discipline required for perfect shot placement when conditions are suboptimal. The techniques learned that day had elevated the entire unit's capabilities. Colonel Martinez used the incident as a case study in leadership courses, emphasizing how preconceived notions can prevent military personnel from recognizing and learning from exceptional performance. The story had become a standard example of why professional development requires maintaining an open mind about capability and expertise. Jackson often reflected on how completely his perspective had changed during those few hours. The betting and casual dismissal that had characterized the morning seemed almost embarrassing when viewed against the backdrop of what had actually transpired. The technical knowledge that Chun and Rodriguez had shared continued to influence training programs throughout the special operations community. Their insights about equipment optimization, environmental compensation, and tactical patience had been incorporated into advanced sniper curricula at multiple facilities. Thompson frequently reminded new instructors about the importance of allowing performance to speak before making judgments about capability. The day had taught him valuable lessons about instruction methodology and the need to evaluate competitors based on results rather than assumptions. Dalton had become an advocate for inclusive training environments where capability was measured solely by performance standards rather than preconceived expectations. His experience that day had fundamentally changed his approach to evaluating new personnel and training methods. The story reached beyond the immediate participants when Chun and Rodriguez were invited to speak at military leadership conferences about overcoming assumptions and demonstrating capability in challenging environments. Their presentations became highly sought after throughout the defense community. The range itself had been modified based on lessons learned during that competition. Thompson had implemented new protocols for environmental condition training and equipment evaluation that reflected the advanced methodologies demonstrated by the two SEAL Team 6 operators. Hey, I'm curious about your thoughts on this story. What stood out to you most about how these assumptions were challenged and changed? Do you think there are areas in your own life where you might be making similar judgments based on appearances rather than actual capability? These kinds of moments really make us think about how we evaluate people and situations. The legacy of that day extended far beyond marksmanship competition into broader questions about professional development, respect, and the recognition of excellence. The SEALs had learned that exceptional capability often appears in unexpected forms, and that true professionalism requires acknowledging superior performance regardless of its source. Years later, when asked about the most important lessons of their military careers, many of those 20 SEALs would cite that afternoon at Quantico as a defining moment that changed their understanding of capability, respect, and professional growth. Chun and Rodriguez continued their distinguished careers with SEAL Team 6, their reputations enhanced not only by their operational excellence, but by their professional grace in handling a situation that could have been confrontational. They had demonstrated that true expertise speaks for itself, without requiring validation or explanation. The story became a testament to the power of letting performance define capability rather than allowing assumptions to prevent recognition of exceptional skill. In a military environment where respect is earned through demonstrated competence, Two quiet professionals had provided an unforgettable lesson about the unexpected nature of true excellence.